Hello, my name is Nathan Byrd, and you are joining us on the Acquisition IQ podcast. And I'm joined here with John Curtin. John Curtin is the CEO of Now Exit and Now Capital, an expert in mergers and acquisitions in transforming businesses into and from $10 million to $100 million exits. As a vintage international speaker, he shares his expertise on maximizing valuation, exit planning, and business growth strategy. John has proven track record of advising company owners and entrepreneurs through complex deals, ensuring high value exits, and with extensive experience in deal structuring, negotiation, and valuation, he is a expert at what he does. Thank you, John, for joining us today. Man, I'm looking forward to getting into this podcast with you. I've had many guests on this channel, and there are a lot of questions that business owners out there have. One, it's the value creation within the business, because why do you even work in a business? It's important for you to work in the on the business, but also in the business, but also understand that there are ways you can increase the value for a maximal exit. But you've got to define exactly why you want to do what you're doing, and then also understand the technical complexities that are involved with that. So share with us a little bit of your insight as far as the technical complexities that are behind the scenes for those founders on how they can create the most maximal exit value.
Yeah, and I like the way you started that with why you're growing, right? The only thing that grows for no reason is cancer, right? When we're trying to grow a business, it's what is the end goal? Is it that I'm going to scale this business some particular size? Am I going to hand off the business to a family member, or am I going to sell? And if I'm going to sell, what size am I looking to sell at?
Mm-hmm.
And what amount of money, pretty simply, do I need for this to make sense, lifestyle wise, and your identity as it's rolled up into the business. So we really like to set an endpoint early, um, and then once you have an endpoint in mind of what you're trying to grow for, now we can build out a little bit of a roadmap.
Yep.
So we do a lot of education with clients on road mapping to that end. And we'll talk about it a little bit as we go, but there's kind of 7 things as we count them that are the most important for increasing the valuation of a company at a high level, being able to be separate from your company, being able to be an owner and not just always an operator in the business, being able to have predictability around revenue, and being able to train and scale without having to scale your own hours. So,
We'll get to the 7 that you speak about all over. And I think, though, it's also important for us as business owners to not do this hamster of a wheel of continually working within our business to only have a subpar exit or even lower than what you could have exited in your business. I know you just touched on a few ways that we will exit.
yeah,
It's either going to be through death, us quitting, or our business, shutting down, right?
yeah,
Or we sell our business. And I just, and that's why we do this podcast, is for education for those out there that are in the trenches day in, day out. But we want this podcast to be a place of education where people can step out of that hamster wheel, right? That,
yeah,
like you want to call it. Even though it's your own job, it's your own business, you can still feel as if, and it can realistically be a place where it just feels like
yeah,
a job,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when people are building the business, they absolutely are grinding. Usually starts with them, and they're trying to grow a business. And there's kind of a whole life cycle over how you treat the business. One, it's really just you, and you're the hustler. And then that kind of dies at some point, and you become the CEO who's now working on the business instead of just in. And then there's a final transition that has to go to you're the owner now, and the business is capable of running without you, both in leadership, and in sales. And so, defining the endpoint and understanding that is a really, really huge deal. Yeah.
It's important for us too as we get into the intricacies of a business because it goes through life cycles. And you, as we know this to be true as entrepreneurs, what has gotten you to one point will not get you to the other point. That would be the scale of your company. And in order to scale a company, you must implement standard operating procedures. How important is that? Have you seen through the overall valuation or the value of a company
Yeah.
or exit?
Yeah, and kind of what that plays into what we were talking about before. When you're talking about the value of a company, you are usually worth a certain range of, say, EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, right? And whether you're at the bottom of that range compared to your peers or whether you're at the top of that range is really around professionalization. And professionalization is all of that documentation, that process, that training culture, and even kind of that tech stack, but really around, could you scale your business and duplicate what you're doing now to, say, 1,000 people? And thinking that way all the way from the beginning, from day one of your business. How do I build a business that can be scaled and explained to somebody and hire on 100 people at a time and be able to do that level of training? So, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's always important to ask that question of what if, right? There's always this what if scenario that I was like, well, what if I had to scale to 50 locations? For the one
Yeah.
gentleman who has
Yep.
one franchise, right? And that leads me to my next question and point that we know to be true is there's a literal term called McDonaldization. And McDonald's had created such a well-oiled machine, an efficient franchise that could be scaled, duplicated across now the entire world. Well-known brand, but it's really because of the system.
Yep.
So can you share with me maybe a use case or something that you've experienced potentially within systems that have been created where all you got to do is just add money?
Yeah. Yeah, the just add water, right? The
Yeah.
just add money for a buyer, which is what, say, private equity is interested in doing. They don't want to manage day to day. So on McDonald'sization,
Yeah.
that's kind of the ability to scale training and process. Every location is the same, has the same duplicatable procedures. And that really was the standard for a long time. And now the med spa explosion
Mhm.
with buyers that are coming in, in en masse. The amount of millions and billions of dollars flowing into the space is because they have captured all of the major things. They have recurring revenue. There's a membership that they have as a guaranteed predictable revenue stream. Every time the person comes in for their membership appointment, they can then be upsold on new products. And then the McDonald'sization of, you could have, say, 4 to 6 locations, and now private equity comes in. They put essentially infinite money on your books to scale. And now they go 100 locations that all look the same, that have the same training program, that offer the same things. The menu is the same, and procedure and process is constant. And now in this specific case, in states where they need, say, a medical officer, they can scale it all the way down the country and put one medical officer specialized in place. That's been fascinating. Is the McDonald'sization has even grown now to having predictable revenue on top of that in some of these spaces. So while not everybody or every business can hit all of those key things, keeping in mind that predictability and recurring revenue and low churn of customers and the ability to duplicate scale very quickly on your software and tech systems, on your people and training, that is the world of difference between you and a large company that you want to be.
Predictability and then you just nailed it is so important, but like you also said, there are some companies that they do it really well, hence their success. and other companies that don't do it so well. Have you seen companies or scenarios where maybe people that you're working with, or things that you've heard through the grapevine of unsuccessful transactions, and what are some of the main points? Obviously there are so many different reasons why one transaction doesn't work. Can you share with us?
Yeah, the majority have been around on the technical side, it's been around a lack of preparation, right? Not being able to produce financials in time to be able to prove the performance the businesses had so they don't end up getting to the value they're hoping for. It's been around um, treating the business as being the operator constantly. So you sit with your salespeople, you sit with different departments, you know what they're doing. But a buyer who only wants to manage needs KPIs around every department. They need to be able to manage at a distance, right? So if you're not preparing your ability to produce financials, to measure by KPIs from a distance, and to be able to train your people when you are not there, you are probably not ready for a big exit. Beyond that, there's the emotional state that we talk about a lot, and we're going to have a panel speaker that's going to talk a good bit about this. But what do you do the Monday morning after you sell your business, right? So you're preparing this business all the way along to have physical separation, to run without you, so that it's a saleable business. But you also have to understand that you're kind of preparing emotionally to create a business that's easy to manage, that you can hand off for a large amount of money, and recognizing it is not you. So even
That's good.
even the emotional bent helps someone do the technical work to get it away from themselves. I do not have to be the bottleneck in my company to be valuable, right?
Mm. And we see that to be true. So many entrepreneurs, they've got this attitude where I'll get it done. If it is to be, it's up to me. We've heard that multiple times.
So,
And then and it can be the downfall though of an organization. It can be the downfall of that person's success really within the business, because lack of delegation, which again, if I'm a buyer of a company and I look and I do due diligence and I see that there's a cultural inefficiency or a leadership problem, I'm going to pick that apart. And now I'm going to start, for example, if you're the one who's selling, I'm going to start picking you apart because I'm starting to see areas that aren't running efficiently, and I won't pay top dollar for that.
yep.
Have you gone through that before when people are doing due diligence?
Oh yeah, I mean, whether we're representing a company or whether you're talking about me personally, being able to get others doing jobs is really hard. I mean, there's just no scenario in which it's easy to have done it yourself and you like doing it a certain way and then
Mhm.
handing it off. But if you're going into a transaction, but even if you want to have a good lifestyle while you run your business, you have to do it. It's a hard thing, and it's only going to be solved by being religious about having a training culture, by being religious about documenting what you do. Now, when you get into a sale process, things are sped up 100x, right? And that's exactly right. A buyer does not want to buy a business that is dependent on you, who they're buying out right now. They, if you're looking to completely exit, this thing needs to be totally independent. They probably want to keep you on, say 3 to 5 years after sale. But even then, if all of the processes of the business are dependent upon you, they're not interested in that. They needed to
Mm.
be able to scale because you cannot work 1,000 hours a day, right? They cannot hire on 1,000 people and you make sure every person is doing it the way you want them to do it and managing them directly. There has to be the ability to teach, scale, and grow the business with your intent rather than having to physically manage all of the departments.
I bet you if an entrepreneur had 1,000 hours a day, they'd probably work 1,000 hours a day.
They would try. Yeah, we we know enough entrepreneurs to know that right, they will figure out how to get it done, period. And even myself, like we talk to business owners all the time, like I have the trouble. I have to restrain myself from doing something because that's not the best use of my time. And
Mhm.
so if you're even 5, 7, maybe 10 years out from selling a business, it's time to choose where to restrain
Yeah.
yourself and let somebody do it 60% as well as you do it, because eventually 60% is going to be better than you trying to do it 100% but only
Yeah.
spending 1% of your time on it.
I think it's imperative for anyone in business to have, in essence, the standardized exit strategy, you know,
Mm,
and all
yeah.
the tools that it requires for you to understand. Doesn't mean you're exiting right away, you know.
Yeah.
I have a family business and I speak to my business partners about the exit of our company. You know, whether it's 7 to 10 years now, it's just a matter of how do we structure that correctly? What is our thought process going to be of that end in mind? And how do we structure that again? Team, finance, um, the product. You know, is it going to be a subscription based business or
Yeah.
is it going to be product based? Is it going to be do we have, because we have predictable revenue whenever we sell our product at specific areas. We know exactly how much we make, even down to the hour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there are other business owners out there that are in a similar position, but yet they haven't quite yet planned for what that exit's going to look like.
Every business has an area where the business owner is really good at measuring that area. There are a
Hmm.
million construction companies that they are the best in the world at planning and constructing a building, right? But they usually have a blind spot somewhere. And that blind spot has to be identified. Either they're not necessarily relying on financial data or a tech stack, or marketing doesn't make sense to them, so they're not doing it. You really need an outside person to come in and give a readiness in all of the different areas. We realized that, we'll do a 12-week, we call it a roadmap to value course, and we have 10 experts who all have a completely different perspective. The lawyer has a different perspective as to what your problems are, from the guy who builds sales teams to the person who's doing the investment banking, all the way down to how well are you training? Is it understandable by the average human being that you're
Hmm.
going to want to bring into the company? So bringing in that third party and identifying your blind spots is huge. So,
Well, and then at the end of the day, it just increases the overall valuation of the business because you personally, as the founder and as the leader of an organization, you're bettering yourself. You know, and we see the direct correlation between the education that we place into our lives to then the outcome and how that just, in essence, just increases our overall value.
yeah,
Huh.
I mean, the average investment banking experience that we sought out to change was basically investment banker comes to you and says, "Give me this big check. I'll let you know if anyone wants to buy you," and then sign on the dotted line, right? But that's not the way that we want to interact with people, and that's not the way I'd want to be interacted with. So there's a whole education where and we think everybody should do this, want the business owner to be in place to negotiate with us. So the two most important things, and really the only two buckets that all of the activities in an M&A deal fall into, is one, to sell growth in the future, and two, to lower the perception of risk. We are coming in to lower the perception of risk, doing an accounting and a legal and a business diligence, and showing that we have predictability, that the financials are exactly such, that the EBITDA is consistent, that we've been growing, right? As soon as we solve that, though, we really want to spend the time on how would we grow organically? And that's the business owner. I would do these 3 to 5 things to grow my business double or triple over the next 5 to 7 years. If I had all the money in the world, these are the things I'd do to grow organically. And then inorganically, Who would I acquire and why? How would that boost my business? That's really, we document it for the owner, but that's really dependent on the owner being able to communicate how he would grow the business in those ways. And then we follow up by saying, and by the way, he says he can triple. We've actually now proven that with his systems and with his processes, he could double, say, with only hiring one more general manager and being able to show the company does not break on its current systems if it triples. So he sells the future and we solve a lot of those perception of risk issues. That is the best case scenario. I don't know if we have time for a quick story.
Oh, yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, so we had a very large plumbing company at one point, and they had nothing in the way of financials, literally in an Access database at one point. And we came in about 10 months before we were even going to go to market and rebuilt 5 years of their financials from bank statements. It was a very, very involved pickup. One of the best operators we've ever worked with, but just that was not what he cared about. And he had, say, the classic one office lady who started with him, who knew everything, and it never became a problem to manage all of this. So we come in, we rebuild 5 years so well that we get through a sell side quality of earnings and get him to a buyer. Now, the buyer never found out how messy the financials were a mere 10 months before and never found out how much risk there had been in measurement. And so we quickly nailed the buy side quality of earnings, the legal diligence, and got through all of our technical in about 45 days, which is unusually quick. And the next 45 days were spent with the owner able to sell why his business is so valuable. And at one point, a gem came up that he built the business to not chase accounts receivable. And he had the subcontractor get the final payment as their profit. So he was paid and had made his profit if ever a change order happened. And between that and a couple things that were absolutely brilliant in the way he built the company, in the least common story ever, the valuation went up $20 million from the first offer to the final close. And so that is the power of
Quality of
heavy,
earnings.
heavy preparation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of quality of earnings too, right? Being able to absolutely nail that, all that risk perception so that the owner is in the position to help us sell his business.
When should you utilize a quality of earnings? And for those of you out there, what is a quality of earnings as well?
Yeah, so a quality of earnings is always done by a buyer, right? It's been pretty uncommon up until the last couple of years for a seller to do it as well. But a quality of earnings is being able to be a heavily scoped audit of how revenue is recognized, of liabilities, and of adjustments to EBITDA, right? So there are a lot of really complicated things, and the accounting standards under GAAP are changing periodically, where you are getting a valuation of say 100 million, but you may not realize that some of your capitalized leases are going to back off of that in a cash-free, debt-free calculation. You may not know exactly how much working capital you have to leave in the business after you sweep the cash, right? And then we have a huge increase in adjusted EBITDA from just where EBITDA started because you have personal things in the business, one time, non normal, non recurring expenses that when you add back for a business owner in the lower middle market, like where we work, can be sometimes 20-30% more EBITDA. And we need to be able to defend every single one of those transactions. That's where a quality of earnings comes in. It's a third party group that justifies all of the financials in the way that you would build it into cash free, debt free, and then helps you justify, battle test every single transaction and why it's added back, so that when the buy side quality of earnings comes in, we have very specific answers very quickly, and we shorten the amount of time spent on the technical diligence in that 90-day exclusivity period after you sign a letter of intent.
Yeah, and you had just stated previously that being able to go through that process is immensely valuable for that business and really essential, you know.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I mean there's no substitute. When we've tried to do deals where we got brought in very very late, there have been wild adjustments that not only are difficult to then explain because you have to do it live basically and don't have a lot of the preparation, but once there's confusion put into a transaction, it is only against you. If everything isn't hashed out and there is any confusion or there's any lack of clarity on why something is or where something is, the buyer is always, even if they secretly understand because they've been heavily in the industry, they're going to pretend they don't because it is in their incentive to cloud the situation in order to get a better price.
let's add some clarity here on the ending of this podcast on maybe a lasting nugget that you would give somebody out there that's looking to sell a business. What is a few lasting important things to do with the business?
Yeah, I think what I talked about, really engaging early on so that you can lower perception of risk in your business, being in place and educated on the process so that you can sell the future. And then, kind of the teaser or the nugget I'll give you so everyone comes to Acquicon is thinking about the incentive of your buyer. There is a very different incentive for private equity versus a family office, right? And I really would like to talk about that more as we do the sell side panel that's coming up next week. So
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing from you at the conference. And guys, we would love to have you as well. And we just want to say thanks a lot, though, for watching this. And if you like the Acquisition IQ podcast, make sure to subscribe as well as share this with your friends. And if you guys would like to join us at our upcoming conference in Salt Lake City, it will be on March 21st, 2025. You'll get to meet people just like John here that have expert experience in the M&A space. So thank you, and we'll talk to you again soon.